Attention all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Joining us right now on the phone, the acting Secretary of Labor, Keith Sonderling, who, by the way, whose parents are Holocaust survivors. We can't get away from this topic, but I do want to get away from the topic of anti-Semitism just for a moment with you. Keith, this is something that Larry Kudlow's been saying. We're seeing it mostly in the markets. I know we've had some ups and downs, but the U.S. economy seems to be a lot stronger than people say, and that starts and ends with the jobs. We've had some good jobs reports recently, right?
Yeah, well, good morning, and thanks for having me. And yes, exactly right. You know, people just continue to doubt President Trump's economy. They try to make it worse than it sounds. But we're seeing from the Department of Labor is great job numbers. If you just look at the last 3 months of job reports, we've seen 2 months that have tripled economists' expectations, and last month doubled economists' expectations. So we continue to add new private sector jobs, which is exactly what President Trump promised when he ran for office. Over 900,000 new private sector jobs in President Trump's second term. And that's really significant. If you look back at what the Biden administration was doing, they were adding a lot of jobs in the federal sector. So President Trump promised to right-size the federal sector, down 300,000 federal jobs, and the private market is up 900,000 jobs. And we're seeing growth in the right places, exactly where you would want these private sector jobs, in construction, in manufacturing, in all these industries that left. President Trump promised to bring them back, and all those investments we're seeing in the U.S. are starting to pay off.
Mr. Secretary, years and years ago when I was involved in Ellis Island, we used to have a system where if we needed electricians, we bring in 5,000 electricians or plumbers or et cetera, et cetera. At some place with President Trump bringing in all these new companies and all these new industries, you're going to need some immigration, but we want people that come in. We want immigration of people that want to work and be loyal to America. Is there any talk about getting that done?
Well, our talk is really focused on the American worker right now and making sure American workers have these skills for these new high-skilled, high-paying trade jobs that the president has been brought to the United States. And what we've seen is just from the education system, a complete lack of understanding or caring, frankly, of where these jobs are going and the skills American worker needs. And most college graduates, go 4 years, have a lot of debt, and then they only have about 30% of the skills they need for day one of that job. So the president signed an executive order within his first 100 days to revamp the skills trade, to go back to registered apprenticeships, to go back to employers being the teachers of the employees and getting kids out of high school tremendous opportunities, having them earn while they learn. So a big part of what we're doing at the Department of Labor is we're talking to the companies that are making these historic investments into the U.S. and making sure that as they are making these investments, as they're building these plants, they're telling us the jobs and the trades that they need. And then we're going to local high schools and making sure that they have those programs there, bringing back shop class, bringing back a lot of these skilled trade jobs that have gone, and really encouraging people to take registered apprenticeships right out of high school and earn while they learn without any student debt. So that's how we're tackling it. We want the American worker to get the first opportunity, and they haven't for a long time. So we're really focused on skilling the American worker first to get them into these high-paying jobs.
And it's a great way of life. We're speaking with the acting Secretary of Labor. He's really just recently thrown into the job, Keith Sonderling. You mentioned construction as one of the areas that's growing. And, you can't talk about jobs in America without talking about AI. And everyone's worried about AI killing off jobs. But I have to tell you, Mr. Secretary, you look at Caterpillar, you look at some of these other companies, Deere, the building of these AI data centers is absolutely boosting construction jobs in this country right now. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, sir.
No, a lot of it, too, is you look where these tech companies need to hire. They need electricians. They need plumbers. They need HVAC. To build these data centers, there's about 140,000 job shortage right now in the trades just to build these data centers as well. So they create a lot of jobs related to construction, related to manufacturing, especially when these data centers come online. Operating them takes a lot of skill. But to your point about the AI and the job loss, there's a lot of fear and a lot of doom and gloom. And what we're really trying to do is work directly with companies who are thinking about implementing AI or the companies that are designing AI to actually see what the parameters of what they're trying to do, opposed to what you hear in the news that AI is just going to replace everyone's job and that there's going to be no jobs for students coming out of high school or college because AI is going to do all the work. We want to just make sure that American workers and the current workforce and students have those skills so they can use this technology to their advantage. They can use it to be more productive, to have safer work environments. So that's a big goal of ours, is to get rid of the fear and see what these products can and can't do. And that can't happen without those open lines of communications that we're having with tech companies and businesses who want to implement this. But the most important thing is that American workers have these skills because, as you both know, in China, they're starting to teach AI in the second grade, and we need to be competitive and do the same.
Mr. Secretary, Fernando Mateo, I have a very, I think, a very important question for all small business owners in throughout the country. We know that the toughest the toughest times a small businessman has is the first year or two when he opens his small business. I know that President Trump is very much for the workers, very much for small businesses. What can the president do, or what can you do, Mr. Secretary, to make a recommendation? If you start a small business in this country, the first year, the first 2 years, when it's the most difficult, you get federal tax breaks.
Yeah, from the small business perspective, what we're really trying to do is, with the working families tax cuts, what we've seen is the largest tax cut in our country's history. And a big part of that is how do we put not only more money in workers' pockets, but how do we allow businesses to take advantage of that too? And,
Exactly.
with the full expenses of, taking the full depreciation, tax credits for research and development, factory tax credits. This was really going to help small business owners get off the ground where a lot of the money they would have to be paying in taxes. And now they can reinvest in their business and they can reinvest in the workforce. And we're seeing it too for workers with no tax on tips and no tax on overtime,
Exactly.
which really impacts small businesses. If you think of small businesses out there where you have less staff and you're going to have to provide overtime, or in the restaurant industry, starting a restaurant where a lot of the workers are going to be making their money on tips, with the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, that's just more take-home pay for the workers, which is going to allow these people to stay in small businesses and grow with the company. But really, a part that's not talked about is just the expensing of equipment and research and development that is going to allow small businesses to really prosper without having to pay those taxes that would otherwise bury a small business.
We're speaking with Acting Secretary of Labor Keith Sonderling. I when I was an executive producer at CNBC, I had a relatively private meeting with one of your predecessors, Tom Perez, who was the labor secretary under President Obama. And I just asked him point blank, I said, sir, why aren't you in charge of the Department of Education? I believe in intellectual attributes and pursuits. My father, for many, many years, a tenured professor of theology and philosophy. So I'm not anti-intellectual in any way. This is a big part of my life as well. However, I don't think a government education department should be separate from our labor department. The only thing we should be overseeing from the government as far as education is concerned is, are we teaching our kids the skills? You just mentioned Chinese kids in second grade level are learning AI. Is there any discussion about this? Because we know we're trying to basically get rid of the waste in government. The education department is going under these big reviews. Is there any discussion about merging your agenda at the Secretary of Labor with one of an education agenda and maybe combining these departments? Anyone talking about this, or is just me, Jake Novak, being crazy?
No, actually, you know exactly what we're doing. And, President Trump doesn't just agrees with you and doesn't like to talk about it. So it's already happening. This has been one of the key agendas for the president on the Department of Education. Number one, obviously sending it back to the states, but we do have now America's talent strategy for the golden age for the American worker, and that is a document that we created with the Department of Commerce and the Department of Education and Department of Labor to do exactly what you're saying, to have industry-led curriculum. Employers are the ones who know exactly the workers they need, the type of equipment they're going to be working on. So instead of the teachers and the teachers unions dictating what the curriculum is, we want industry, businesses, the people who are going to hire them, the people who are going to keep them employed, the people who can train them to actually dictate what that educational curriculum should be, not just in community colleges, but going down to high school. So we have what's called an interagency agreement with the Department of Education, and that means the Department of Labor is going to help assist the Department of Education not only with that curriculum, but actually funding the state. So a lot of that is going to come here, and that allows our experts here who are in the workforce, whose stakeholders are industry, to be able to dictate how that money should go out and how it should spend and what that curriculum should be. So you had a lot of foresight during the Obama administration when you talked to the secretary, because the president is moving on this as well, and the partnership has already occurred, and we actually have moved many of the Department of Education staff physically to our building here in D.C. So that's occurring, and you, I guess, could have written this a couple of years ago for us. So that's exactly what President Trump wants to do, exactly what we're doing now.
Well, it was a humbling moment. Keith Sonderling, the acting Secretary of Labor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I got to tell you, I'm encouraged by what you were saying. Definitely feel better about our future right now.